The fog hung thick over the French countryside that September morning. Gray mist swirled between trees and hedgerows. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Most aircraft sat grounded, waiting for better weather. But at 12:47 p.m. on September 20th, 1944, the conditions finally started to clear near Aracore. Major Charles Carpenter peered through his scratched windscreen. His knuckles went white as he gripped the control stick tighter. The fabric-covered wings of his Piper L-4 Grasshopper trembled in the humid air. Through breaks in the lifting fog, dark shapes moved across the open fields below. German armor. Lots of it. Rolling toward American positions with mechanical precision. His tiny observation plane had never been built for what he planned to do next. The morning sun filtered through the dissipating mist. It cast long shadows across the battlefield. Steam rose from wet grass. The air smelled of damp earth and diesel exhaust from the tanks below. Those words he had spoken to the Stars and Stripes reporter still echoed in his mind. Some people around here think I'm nuts, but I just believe that if we're going to fight a war, we have to get on with it 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day. The philosophy of a former high school history teacher from Illinois, a man who had turned his fragile aircraft into something unprecedented. 6 bazookas now hung from his wing struts like deadly ornaments. The German tank crews crawling across the countryside had no idea what approached them. Their massive Panthers weighed 45 tons each. The Tigers tipped the scales at 57 tons, mechanical monsters covered in thick steel armor. Each one could crush houses under their tracks. Their guns could punch holes through buildings from miles away. Above them circled a plane that barely weighed 1,220 pounds. Cotton fabric stretched over a steel tube frame. An engine that produced less horsepower than a Tiger tank's cooling fan. The Germans had a nickname for the American pilot, the Mad Major. Today, they would learn why that name stuck. Mathematics made the whole thing seem impossible. The L-4's Continental engine wheezed out just 65 horsepower. That was pathetic compared to the monsters below. Top speed hit 85 miles per hour on a good day. A Panther tank could rotate its turret faster than that. The plane's skin was so thin, a pistol bullet could tear right through it. But by sunset, 2 Panther tanks would be smoking wrecks in the French dirt. Their crews would be dead or fleeing, killed by what looked like a civilian training plane that belonged at a flying club, not a battlefield. The engagement would become legend. The Battle of Aracore represented Germany's final desperate attempt to stop the Allied advance, their last major armored counteroffensive in the Lorraine region. General Hasso von Manteuffel had scraped together every available tank and assault gun. The 5th Panzer Army fielded 262 armored vehicles, an impressive force on paper. The elite 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades led the assault. Behind them rolled the veteran 11th Panzer Division. These units brought 107 Panther tanks and 75 Panzer Rifles. 80 assault guns provided additional firepower. A steel avalanche aimed at crushing American resistance before it could solidify. Among the attacking formations, the 113th Panzer Brigade stood out, hastily formed but equipped with Germany's most advanced armor. Their Panthers represented the pinnacle of German tank design. Each one mounted a high-velocity 75mm gun. These weapons could destroy any Allied tank from over 2,000 meters away. Their frontal armor measured 80 mm thick and sloped at 55 degrees. Most Allied anti-tank weapons bounced off like pebbles. The steel beasts rolling across the French countryside seemed unstoppable. Their tracks churned up mud and grass. Exhaust smoke trailed behind them in dark clouds. Engine noise echoed across the valley. But these magnificent machines carried a fatal flaw, one their designers had never seriously considered. The roof armor on Panthers measured only 16 to 25 millimeters thick. Tigers had 25 millimeters on top. German engineers had focused on threats from ground level: enemy tanks, anti-tank guns, artillery firing horizontally. They never imagined their greatest danger might drop from above, especially not from a tiny observation plane armed with infantry weapons. German doctrine regarding light aircraft had remained consistent throughout the war. L-4 Grasshoppers and similar planes were harmless spotters, best left alone to avoid revealing positions. Shooting at them only confirmed German locations for Allied artillery observers. Better to stay hidden and let the little planes buzz around uselessly. This tactical calculation was about to change forever. Lieutenant General Walter Kruger commanded the 58th Panzer Corps. He would later describe these new panzer brigades as having slight combat value. Incomplete training showed in every movement. Equipment shortages plagued every unit. They lacked adequate reconnaissance capabilities. Advancing blindly against the Americans was like walking into a trap. They were about to face something no training manual had ever covered. Charles Carpenter had been born August 29, 1912, in rural Illinois. His farming family lost everything when the Great Depression hit. The divorce of his parents shattered what remained of their stability. Young Charles and his siblings worked neighboring farms just to eat. Despite the hardships, he excelled in school. Scholarships took him to Roosevelt Military Academy in Aledo, Illinois, then to Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Before the war changed everything, Carpenter taught history at Malden High School. That's where he met Elda Fritiel. They married in 1940 and had a daughter named Carol. But war clouds were gathering over America. When the country entered the conflict in 1942, the 30-year-old teacher made his choice. He enlisted immediately. Commission as second lieutenant followed flight training. By 1944, he had earned promotion to major. His assignment took him to the 1st Bombardment Division in France. Then transfer to fly artillery support for General George S. Patton's 4th Armored Division. His primary job involved reconnaissance and artillery spotting missions. The L-4 Grasshopper was the military version of the Piper J-3 Cub. A civilian trainer pressed into military service. He also served as personal pilot for General John S. Wood. The 4th Armored Division commander gave him unusual freedom to pursue his own initiatives. The aircraft assigned to him carried serial number 43-30426. Soon, it would gain a name that played off the famous Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Rocketer would become legendary. In August 1944, Carpenter wrote home to Elda. His words revealed the constant danger. Lately I have been taking quite a few chances, but my luck has been marvelous. Yesterday I got a bullet hole through the wing and hit a church steeple with one wheel. It was very little for what might have happened under the circumstances. His philosophy of warfare was simple and brutal. He told Associated Press correspondent Wes Gallagher exactly what he believed. My idea of fighting a war is to attack, and then attack again. No hesitation, no half measures, maximum aggression all the time. Carpenter wasn't the first pilot to think about arming an L-4. Lieutenants Harley Merrick and Roy Carson had experimented earlier. They mounted bazookas on their observation planes and destroyed 2 German trucks. But Carpenter would perfect the technique, take it to levels nobody else imagined. The modification started simple. 2 M1A1 bazookas attached to the wing struts. Working with ordnance technicians, Carpenter developed a mounting system that could handle the stresses. Plywood backing plates distributed weight and recoil forces across the fragile wing structure. The wood had to be strong enough to absorb the shock without splintering. Electrical wiring snaked from the launch tubes into the cockpit. Toggle switches mounted within easy reach let him fire rockets individually or in salvos. The system had to work after hours of vibration and violent maneuvers. Simple enough to repair with basic tools in field conditions. Initial testing revealed serious problems. The M1A1 bazookas fired 2.36-inch diameter rockets. They could penetrate about 3 inches of armor, enough for light vehicles and trucks, marginal against real tank armor. Carpenter needed something better. He upgraded to 6 M9 bazookas. These fired the improved M6A3 HEAT rounds, high-explosive anti-tank rockets that could punch through 3.9 inches of armor at a 30-degree impact angle, more than enough to defeat the thin top armor of any German tank, even the mighty Tigers. The complete modification added 106 pounds to an aircraft already at its weight limit. With a gross weight capacity of 1,220 pounds, every ounce mattered. The pilot, fuel, and basic equipment already accounted for most of that. Carpenter had to fly alone. The observer's position stayed empty. There simply wasn't enough lift capacity for another person. Aerodynamic impact was severe. The bazookas created massive drag. Top speed dropped from an already modest 85 km/h. Turns became sluggish and unpredictable. The plane that had been designed for gentle observation flights now carried firepower equal to half a dozen infantry anti-tank teams. Hitting a tank from an L-4 seemed technically impossible. The aircraft had no gun sight, no aiming system beyond the pilot's eye and instinct. The bazookas were fixed to fire straight ahead. That meant Carpenter had to point the entire aircraft at his target like a giant arrow. M6A3 rockets had an effective range of about 300 yards, but accuracy dropped dramatically beyond 100 yards. Wind drift, aircraft motion, and the rocket's own instability all worked against precision. To achieve hits, Carpenter developed a specific attack profile that would become his trademark. Starting from 1,500 feet altitude, he would spot his target and begin a corkscrew descent. This spiral approach confused anti-aircraft gunners on the ground. They couldn't predict his flight path or establish proper lead for their weapons. The spiraling dive looked random but followed a careful pattern. At 300 feet, he would level out briefly, line up his aircraft with the target below, check wind direction and speed, calculate the dive angle needed, then push forward into a steep descent that made his stomach drop. The final approach required nerves of absolute steel. At 100 yards from target, barely 300 feet away, Carpenter would toggle his firing switches. 6 rockets would streak toward the enemy armor trailing smoke. Immediately after firing, he would haul back on the stick, using every bit of the Continental engine's limited power to climb away from inevitable return fire. The entire attack sequence took less than 30 seconds, from beginning the spiral dive to climbing clear. But those were 30 seconds of maximum vulnerability. Every German soldier below would be shooting at him. Machine guns, rifles, pistols, anything that could reach a low-flying aircraft. The Continental 065 engine struggled with the extra weight and drag. Normal climb rate dropped from 450 feet per minute to barely 200 feet per minute when fully loaded. Every foot of altitude was precious. It meant another second away from effective small arms range, another moment to plan the next attack or escape. September 20th, 1944 began with fog so thick most pilots wouldn't even attempt takeoff. Combat Command A, under Colonel Bruce C. Clark, held positions near Aracore. Intelligence reports warned of German armor massing for attack. Carpenter took off despite the weather, trusting conditions would improve once airborne. When the fog finally lifted around noon, Carpenter was already circling above the battlefield. Below him, elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade advanced in formation. A company of Panther tanks moved across open ground toward American positions. Their crews scanned for enemy tanks and anti-tank guns. None of them looked up at the small observation plane circling overhead. Carpenter began his attack run. The characteristic corkscrew descent that had become his signature. Wind whistled through the wing struts as speed built up. The aircraft shuddered and bucked in the dive. At precisely 100 yards range, he pressed the firing switches. 6 rockets screamed toward the lead Panther. Smoke trails marked their path through the air. The rockets struck the thin roof armor and punched through into the crew compartment. The massive tank lurched to a stop. Black smoke poured from open hatches. Flames began to lick around the turret ring. Banking hard left, Carpenter climbed desperately as machine gun fire erupted from the German column. Muzzle flashes sparkled like deadly fireworks. He could hear bullets punching through the fabric skin of his aircraft, the distinctive popping sound of lead tearing through cotton. But somehow, nothing vital was hit. Within 30 minutes, he had landed at a forward airstrip. Ground crews swarmed over the plane checking for damage. Patching bullet holes with fabric patches and dope, reloading the bazooka tubes with fresh rockets, refueling from jerry cans while the engine ticked as it cooled. The second sortie found German tanks trying to reorganize. They had spread out across the field, making themselves harder targets but disrupting their own advance. Carpenter selected another Panther and pushed into his dive. This time the Germans were ready and waiting. Small arms fire filled the air around his aircraft like a deadly cloud. Tracer rounds streaked past his wings. The distinctive crack and pop of bullets tearing through fabric accompanied him throughout the dive. But his aim remained steady and true. Another Panther took direct hits and died. Its turret crew killed instantly by rocket blast that penetrated the 16 mm roof armor. Ammunition began cooking off inside the hull. Secondary explosions rocked the tank as shells detonated. On his third sortie that afternoon, Carpenter found the surviving tanks beginning to withdraw. Their advance had been completely disrupted by attacks from above. By day's end, he had fired 16 rockets total. 2 Panther tanks confirmed destroyed. Crews dead or wounded. The German counterattack had been stopped cold. The legend of Bazooka. Charlie was born that day. The 4th Armored Division's official history would specifically note his role in stopping the German assault. Before Carpenter's attacks, German military doctrine treated observation aircraft as minor nuisances. Standard procedure was to ignore them unless they posed immediate threats. Engaging them would reveal positions and invite artillery strikes, a poor tactical trade that experienced commanders avoided. This calculation changed completely after word spread about rocket-armed L-4s. German units began receiving urgent bulletins warning about American observation planes carrying anti-tank weapons. What had been harmless spotters were now potential tank killers. Every sighting required immediate defensive action. Carpenter himself noticed the change right away. As he told a Stars and Stripes reporter later, "Every time I show up now, they shoot with everything they have. They never used to bother Cubs. Bazookas must be bothering them a bit." The impact on German operations went far beyond tanks actually destroyed. Tank commanders now had to constantly scan skies for slow-moving aircraft. Formations had to disperse when L-4s appeared overhead. This disrupted momentum and coordination of attacks. Anti-aircraft weapons had to be redirected from protecting against fighter bombers. Now they engaged observation planes flying at treetop level. Infantry units received orders to engage any L-4 with rifles and machine guns, creating curtains of fire that made low-altitude operations increasingly hazardous. The 113th Panzer Brigade entered the Battle of Arrancourt with 90 operational tanks. Within 1 week, only 27 remained in fighting condition. While not all losses could be attributed to Carpenter alone, his attacks contributed to psychological pressure that degraded German combat effectiveness throughout the unit. Tank crews who had felt relatively safe from air attack in poor weather now faced threats that could appear at any moment. The sound of any small aircraft engine put them on edge. Every L-4 might be armed and hunting for targets. Paranoia spread through the ranks like a disease. October 1944 saw Carpenter refine his tactics and increase effectiveness. Now famous within Third Army, he was given complete freedom to hunt targets of opportunity. In that month alone, he was credited with destroying 4 more tanks and an armored truck. His official total reached 6 tanks destroyed, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks. October 4th brought another spectacular engagement near Château Salins. Carpenter spotted a column of German armor attempting to counterattack American positions. Diving through intense small arms fire that filled the air around his aircraft, he destroyed a Panzer IV with direct hits to its engine deck. The burning tank blocked a narrow road. Vehicles behind it were trapped and became easy targets for American tank destroyers waiting in ambush. One attack had paralyzed an entire German column and set up their destruction. A week later, near Moncourt Woods, Carpenter spotted Tiger tanks supporting a German infantry attack. The Tigers, with their 88mm guns and massive armor, were the most feared tanks in the German arsenal. Each weighed 57 tons and mounted armor up to 100mm thick on the front hull. But their roof armor was still only 25mm. Vulnerable to Carpenter's rockets, if he could get close enough, his attack on the Tigers required exceptional courage beyond anything he had shown before. These tanks were typically surrounded by infantry and light anti-aircraft guns specifically positioned to protect against air attack. Carpenter dove through a curtain of tracer fire that lit up the sky around him. Machine gun bullets sparked off his engine cowling. He released his rockets at minimum range, with muzzle flashes winking below. Pulled up just as explosions erupted behind his climbing aircraft. One Tiger was confirmed destroyed. Its ammunition detonated in a spectacular fireball that could be seen for miles. The blast threw the 57-ton turret completely off the hull. The impact extended far beyond physical destruction of one tank. German tank crews, already stressed by American material superiority, now faced threats from an unexpected direction. They could no longer park under trees for concealment. L-4s could spot them anyway through gaps in foliage. They couldn't ignore the sound of small aircraft engines. Any one of them might be armed and hunting. Each mission Carpenter flew pushed the boundaries of both physics and probability. The L-4 was never designed for combat operations. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing. A single tracer round could turn the aircraft into a fireball. The pilot sat surrounded by nothing more than steel tubing and fabric, completely exposed to enemy fire from every direction. In his letters, home carefully censored to avoid worrying his wife, Carpenter hinted at the constant dangers. After one particularly intense mission, he wrote simply, "Had some excitement today. The plane has a few more holes, but still flies fine." What he didn't mention was that those holes represented near misses that could have severed control cables, punctured fuel lines, or struck the pilot himself. Ground crews who serviced Rosie the Rocketer began keeping informal counts of battle damage. After particularly intense missions, they would tally dozens of bullet holes requiring fabric patches. The crew chief reportedly told other pilots that Carpenter's plane looked like Swiss cheese after one engagement. Yet somehow, both pilot and aircraft continued to fly and fight. The psychological pressure on Carpenter was immense and constant. Unlike bomber crews who flew at 2,000 feet, relatively removed from immediate violence, Carpenter engaged at point-blank range. He could see individual German soldiers firing at him, see expressions on tank commanders' faces as they realized what was happening. The combat was intensely personal and immediate. Every mission brought him face to face with men trying to kill him. Men he was trying to kill in return. At ranges so close he could see their eyes and facial expressions. Wes Gallagher, the Associated Press correspondent who interviewed Carpenter multiple times, wrote in Liberty magazine that the Major was a legend in an outfit where reckless bravery was commonplace. But Gallagher also noted something else in his observations: a weariness in Carpenter's eyes, the look of a man who had pushed his luck repeatedly and knew the mathematical odds were catching up. The bazooka installation on Carpenter's L-4 underwent constant refinement based on hard-won combat experience. The original mounting system using simple metal brackets proved completely inadequate under combat stress. Recoil forces would gradually work the brackets loose during violent maneuvers. The plywood backing plates distributed forces much better across the fragile wing structure, but they added crucial weight to an already overloaded aircraft. Every pound mattered when trying to climb away from enemy fire. The installation had to be strong enough to handle combat, but light enough not to make the plane unflyable. The electrical firing system presented particular challenges in combat conditions. Wiring had to be routed through wings and into the cockpit, protected from both weather and enemy fire that could sever connections. Toggle switches were mounted on a simple panel within easy reach of the pilot's right hand. Each switch controlled one rocket, allowing for single shots or full salvos. The system had to be reliable enough to function after hours of vibration and extreme maneuvers, yet simple enough to repair with basic tools at forward airstrips. No second chances existed in aerial combat. Aiming remained entirely visual and intuitive throughout Carpenter's career. He developed his own system of reference points using engine cowling, cockpit framework, and even scratches on the windscreen as aiming guides. Lead angles were calculated based on approach speed and dive angle, compensating for wind drift and the rocket's ballistic trajectory. There was no backup system or second-chance mechanism. If he missed the target, he had to climb away under fire and attempt another attack run. Each miss meant another exposure to enemy fire, another roll of the dice with death. The rockets themselves presented unique challenges when fired from aircraft. M6A3 HEAT rounds were designed for ground combat, fired from a soldier's shoulder at relatively stationary targets. When fired from a moving aircraft, their accuracy decreased significantly due to additional variables. The rocket motor burned for only 0.3 of a second, reaching maximum velocity quickly, then coasting to target. Wind, aircraft motion, and the rocket's inherent inaccuracy meant perfect aim didn't guarantee hits. Even textbook attacks could miss due to factors beyond the pilot's control. The Battle of Arrancourt, where Carpenter achieved his most famous success, represented more than just a tactical engagement between opposing forces. It was the largest tank battle on the Western Front, with massive implications. American forces ultimately destroyed 200 German tanks and assault guns, while losing only 25 of their own. The German plan called for 5th Panzer Army to break through American lines and recapture Nancy. This would threaten Patton's entire advance toward the German border. The attacking force included some of Germany's best remaining armored units. Though many were under strength, and hastily reorganized after disasters in Normandy. The 4th Armored Division, Carpenter's unit, bore the main impact of the German assault. Outnumbered significantly in tanks and men, they relied on superior tactics, better logistics, and innovative solutions, like Carpenter's tank-hunting L-4 that provided reconnaissance and direct attack capability. His actions on September 20th came at the most crucial moment of the battle. The German advance had achieved initial surprise against American forward positions. Some units were in danger of being overrun before reinforcements could arrive. By disrupting the Panther Company's attack, Carpenter bought precious time for American forces to reorganize and bring up reserves. His attack wasn't just tactically successful in destroying 2 tanks. It had operational implications for the entire battle. The psychological impact rippled through German ranks like shockwaves. Tank crews who had felt safe from air attack now had to fear even the smallest observation aircraft. The need to constantly scan for L-4s and disperse when they appeared overhead slowed German operations significantly. It disrupted coordination between units and degraded the momentum of attacks. Anti-aircraft weapons had to be repositioned and retargeted constantly. By November 1944, Carpenter had become a genuine celebrity within Third Army and beyond. Stars and Stripes ran multiple articles about Bazooka Charlie and his exploits. Popular Science magazine featured him in their February 1945 issue as What's New in Aviation, Piper Cub Tank Buster. Liberty magazine, the New York Sun, and other major publications picked up his story. He became one of the most famous pilots of the European theater. His exploits were discussed in barracks and officer clubs from England to the front lines. But fame came with dramatically increased danger on every mission. German units received specific warnings about rocket-armed Cubs. Anti-aircraft defenses were reinforced with additional light guns and machine guns positioned specifically to counter the L-4 threat. Every mission became increasingly hazardous as German gunners gained experience engaging slow-moving aircraft at low altitude. Carpenter's own comments to reporters revealed his fatalistic attitude toward the mounting dangers. "Some people around here think I'm nuts," he told them with characteristic understatement, "but I just believe that if we're going to fight a war, we have to get on with it 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day." When reporters asked directly about the dangers he faced on every mission, Carpenter simply shrugged his shoulders. "My luck has been marvelous," he would say, as if luck was something that could be counted on indefinitely, as if the mathematics of survival didn't apply to him. That luck was tested repeatedly as the war continued and German defenses adapted. Beyond the church steeple incident he mentioned in letters home, there were other close calls that could have ended his career instantly. Machine gun fire once severed one of his elevator control cables. This left him with minimal pitch control for the terrifying flight back to friendly territory. Another time, an anti-aircraft shell exploded close enough to pepper his aircraft with hot shrapnel. The metal fragments miraculously missed both pilot and critical control systems, but they left the fabric skin of his aircraft looking like it had been attacked by a giant shotgun. His crew chief, whose name has been lost to history, reportedly begged Carpenter to stop flying the rocket attacks. Ground crews had seen too many L-4s return, riddled with holes. Too many that didn't return at all. The mathematics of aerial combat were unforgiving. Every mission increased the odds of not coming back. But Carpenter continued flying and fighting, driven by a combination of duty and determination that fellow pilots found both inspiring and deeply concerning. He had become something unique in military history, a man who had turned a fragile observation plane into a tank killer, who had rewritten the rules of aerial combat through pure audacity and skill. Carpenter's bravery extended far beyond the cockpit of his aircraft. Military records document at least one extraordinary incident where he brought his L-4 down near active fighting. The engine went silent. Wheels touched dirt. He climbed out under enemy fire. A discarded M1 rifle lay nearby. Carpenter grabbed it without hesitation. The weapon felt familiar in his hands. Every American soldier knew the Garand. He joined the ground battle as if he belonged there. The transformation was complete in seconds. One moment he was a pilot. The next, he was infantry. The battlefield didn't care about job descriptions. Fighting was fighting. Carpenter understood this better than most. His bazooka attack had already shattered the German column. Smoke rose from burning vehicles. Metal twisted in the heat. Survivors scattered among the wreckage. Some tried to regroup. Others simply ran. 6 German soldiers found themselves cut off from retreat. Their column was gone. Their vehicles destroyed. American forces pressed from multiple directions. Surrender became their only option. Carpenter approached them on foot. The rifle stayed ready in his hands. His voice carried the authority of someone who had just destroyed their entire unit. The Germans recognized death when they saw it. Hands went up. Weapons dropped to the ground. The march back to American lines began immediately. Carpenter walked behind his prisoners. The rifle never wavered from their backs. Each step took them further from German territory. Each step made capture more certain. American sentries watched in amazement as the pilot delivered his prizes. 6 enemy soldiers walking in single file. 1 L-4 pilot with an infantry rifle. The scene defied standard operating procedures. No one complained about the results. Another incident revealed even more about Carpenter's character. A disabled Sherman tank sat motionless under German fire. The crew worked frantically on repairs. Enemy infantry pressed closer with each passing minute. The tank's main gun couldn't depress enough to engage them. Carpenter's L-4 appeared overhead like an answer to prayer. He circled once to assess the situation. The tank crew waved desperately. German muzzle flashes sparkled from nearby buildings. Time was running out fast. The decision came instantly. Carpenter brought his aircraft down on the nearest road. The engine sputtered to a stop. He sprinted toward the Sherman through scattered rifle fire. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. He reached the tank and scrambled onto the hull. The .50 caliber machine gun sat unmanned in the commander's cupola. Carpenter grabbed the weapon and swung it toward the German positions. His finger found the trigger. Hot brass began cascading onto the tank deck. The heavy machine gun spoke with devastating authority. 50 caliber rounds punched through walls. Stone and mortar exploded outward. German infantry dove for better cover. Their advance stopped cold under the withering fire. Minutes stretched like hours while repairs continued below. The tank crew worked with renewed urgency. Carpenter fed belt after belt into the hungry weapon. Barrel heat shimmered in the air. The gun never stopped talking. Finally, the Sherman's engine roared back to life. Repairs were complete. The tank could move and fight again. Carpenter kept firing until the crew took their positions. Only then did he abandon his post and sprint back to his aircraft. The tank crew credited him with saving their lives that day. Their after-action report specifically mentioned the pilot who became a gunner. Without his intervention, they would have been overrun. The Germans would have had another Sherman trophy. These ground combat episodes earned recognition beyond his flying achievements. Military brass took notice of the pilot who fought on land and air. His willingness to engage anywhere impressed commanders at every level. This was the kind of fighting spirit that won wars. General Patton himself presented Carpenter with the Silver Star. The ceremony took place near the front lines. Patton's words carried across the assembled troops. This was exactly the kind of fighting man he wanted in his army. This was how Americans should fight. Additional decorations followed the Silver Star. The Bronze Star with oak leaf cluster recognized his ground combat actions. The Air Medal with oak leaf cluster honored his flying achievements. Each ribbon told part of a larger story about one man's war. The ground fighting revealed something fundamental about Carpenter's nature. Being an observer was never going to be enough for him. Neither was being a flying tank destroyer. He wanted to be wherever the fighting was fiercest. He wanted to use whatever weapons were available. This mindset was both admirable and concerning. It showed unlimited courage and determination. It also suggested someone pushing far beyond reasonable limits. War demanded extraordinary efforts. Carpenter seemed determined to exceed even those demands. Official records credit him with destroying 6 tanks total during his combat tour. 2 of those were Tiger heavy tanks. The remaining 4 were lighter vehicles, but still formidable opponents. Several armored cars and trucks also fell to his rockets. These numbers represented confirmed kills only. Unofficial accounts painted a different picture of his effectiveness. Witnesses claimed the actual number might have reached 14 tanks destroyed or disabled. The discrepancy likely reflected the chaos of fluid combat situations. Multiple weapon systems often engaged the same targets simultaneously. Each confirmed kill required extraordinary circumstances to align perfectly. Weather conditions had to be suitable for flying the L-4, but they also had to be poor enough to keep German fighters grounded. Clear skies meant enemy aircraft would intercept him before he reached targets. Carpenter had to locate enemy armor moving through countryside. He had to approach without being detected and shot down immediately. His rockets had to strike vulnerable areas with enough force to cause critical damage. He had to survive the return flight through alerted defenses. The mathematical probability of success approached 0 with each mission. Yet he succeeded repeatedly against impossible odds. Consider the technical challenge he faced every time: hitting a target 20 feet by 10 feet. Those were the approximate dimensions of a tank's top armor. His aircraft flew at 70 miles per hour during attack runs. The distance to target was typically 100 yards when firing. Unguided rockets provided the only armament. The launching platform was inherently unstable during combat maneuvers. Enemy fire added another layer of complexity. Artillery observers witnessed many of Carpenter's attacks firsthand. Their reports described the tactics as impossible and insane. No rational pilot would attempt such close-range engagements. No sane commander would authorize them. Yet, they worked. The 2 Tiger tanks he destroyed represented particularly impressive achievements. Each Tiger cost 250,000 Reichsmarks to produce in German factories. Specialized crews trained for months to operate these machines. They were considered nearly invulnerable to most Allied weapons at the time. Yet they fell to rockets fired from an aircraft that cost $2,500. Basic pilot training was sufficient to fly the L-4 platform. American mass production defeated German technological sophistication through sheer audacity and innovative thinking. Carpenter's role extended far beyond his famous tank hunting exploits. As an observation pilot, he served as General Wood's personal aviator. This position gave him access to high-level operational planning. His intelligence reports shaped major tactical decisions throughout the campaign. His ability to fly low and slow made him ideal for reconnaissance missions. Combined with his naturally aggressive style, this meant he spotted German movements before other intelligence sources. His reports often provided the first warning of enemy concentrations and movements. Early warnings allowed American commanders to preposition reserves and artillery fire. Detailed observations of German defensive positions helped plan attacks with minimal casualties. The intelligence value of L-4 aircraft was already well established throughout the Army. But Carpenter's aggressive tactics yielded even more valuable information than standard reconnaissance flights. By forcing German units to react to his presence, he revealed hidden positions. When they shot at him, they exposed their locations. When they dispersed to avoid his rockets, they showed their true strength. This intelligence work was less dramatic than his tank hunting exploits. It may have been his most valuable contribution to the overall war effort, however. Information he provided saved American lives every day. It shortened engagements that might otherwise have become prolonged battles of attrition. The success of his improvised weapon system highlighted curious aspects of World War II technology development. Germany, despite its reputation for advanced weaponry, had no equivalent to the simple L-4 observation plane. This represented a significant oversight in their military planning. The Wehrmacht relied on the Fieseler Vieh 156 Storch for similar observation missions. It was larger and more complex than the American aircraft. It was also produced in much smaller numbers due to manufacturing limitations. German emphasis on technological sophistication proved inferior to American mass production philosophy. The L-4 was essentially a civilian aircraft pressed into military service. Minimal modifications were required to adapt it for combat use. This simplicity became its greatest strength in field conditions. It was easy to fly and maintain with basic tools. Repairs could be accomplished with readily available materials. German tank designers had created magnificent machines optimized for tank versus tank combat scenarios. The Panther's long 75mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges where return fire proved ineffective. Its frontal armor was nearly impervious to Allied weapons of the time. But this optimization for ground combat left vulnerabilities that simple American ingenuity could exploit effectively. The bazooka itself represented American pragmatism at its finest. Developed quickly from a simple concept, it was mass-produced in enormous numbers. Every infantry squad gained anti-tank capability through this weapon system. When Carpenter mounted 6 of them on his observation plane, he created something German doctrine had never anticipated. They had no effective counter for this innovation. As 1944 turned to 1945, Carpenter continued flying combat missions despite increasing German awareness. The Wehrmacht issued specific instructions for dealing with armed observation aircraft. They dedicated anti-aircraft weapons to tracking them whenever they appeared over the battlefield. December 1944 brought the Battle of the Bulge surprise offensive. Carpenter flew reconnaissance missions in terrible weather conditions that grounded most other aircraft. His reports on German movements helped American commanders respond to the unexpected attack. Poor weather-limited opportunities for tank hunting during this period. His intelligence gathering proved invaluable during the confused early days of the battle. American forces needed accurate information about German positions and movements. Carpenter provided it despite extremely dangerous flying conditions. January 1945 brought renewed offensive operations as American forces pushed toward the Rhine River. Carpenter continued modifying his tactics and experimenting with different approaches. He tried various attack angles and rocket combinations to improve effectiveness. He reportedly considered adding even more rockets to his aircraft. The L-4's weight capacity and structural limits of the wing struts prevented further modifications. 6 bazookas represented the maximum load the airframe could safely carry during combat maneuvers. His last confirmed tank kill came in February 1945 near a contested bridge crossing. A Panzer IV attempted to defend the span against advancing American forces. Carpenter spotted the target and immediately began his attack approach. Witnesses described him diving through a wall of tracer fire to deliver rockets at point-blank range. Anti-aircraft fire filled the air around his fragile aircraft. Bullets passed through fabric without hitting vital components. His rockets found their target with devastating effect. The tank's destruction allowed American engineers to capture the bridge intact and undamaged. This accelerated the advance into Germany by several crucial days. Strategic objectives were achieved because one pilot was willing to risk everything for tactical advantage. March 1945 brought unexpected developments that ended Carpenter's combat flying career. He began experiencing severe fatigue and other concerning symptoms that forced reduction of his flying schedule. Medical examination revealed advanced Hodgkin's disease affecting his lymphatic system. Army doctors delivered a grim prognosis of 2 years to live. The diagnosis ended his combat flying immediately and permanently. He was evacuated to the United States for specialized treatment. Behind him, he left Rosie the Rocketer, and a reputation earned through impossible achievements. His personal war was over, though the larger conflict would continue for 2 more months. The timing was perhaps fortunate, given changing battlefield conditions. German forces became increasingly desperate in the war's final months, making anti-aircraft defenses more deadly than ever. Several L-4 aircraft attempting to emulate Carpenter's tactics were shot down during March and April 1945. The window of opportunity for his unique form of warfare was rapidly closing. Innovation had created temporary advantage, but circumstances were changing. Carpenter received an honorable discharge from the Army in 1946 and returned to civilian life. Against all medical predictions, he survived far longer than the 2 years doctors had given him. His condition became chronic rather than immediately terminal. He returned to teaching history at Banner High School in Illinois, where his career had begun. Marriage to Ella resumed after years of separation and uncertainty. Their daughter Carol was born into a peaceful world her father had helped create through extraordinary service. Remarkably, he rarely spoke about his wartime experiences to family or friends. His daughter later revealed she knew little about his combat record until after his death. This silence was common among combat veterans of his generation. The silence was particularly poignant, given the extraordinary nature of Carpenter's service, however. Few men had achieved what he accomplished in combat. Even fewer had survived to tell about it. Yet he chose to keep those experiences private. In summers, he operated a boys' camp in the Ozark Mountains, teaching outdoor skills and character development. Former campers interviewed decades later remembered him as strict but fair in his approach. He was demanding but supportive of their efforts to improve. None of them knew they were being taught by one of the war's most decorated tank hunters. His heroic past remained hidden beneath the surface of a dedicated educator. The man who had terrorized German tank crews became someone who shaped young American minds. His health gradually deteriorated through the 1950s and early 1960s, despite defying initial medical predictions. The Hodgkin's disease that should have killed him in 1947 instead became a chronic condition he battled for 20 years. He continued teaching until shortly before his death on March 22, 1966, at age 53. Even facing death, he maintained the same quiet dignity that had characterized his post-war life. His extraordinary wartime service remained largely unknown to the world. For decades after the war, the fate of Rosie the Rocketer remained a complete mystery. The aircraft had presumably been scrapped like thousands of other war-surplus L-4 aircraft. Its historical significance went unrecognized in the rush to demobilize. Then in October 2017, aviation historians made a remarkable discovery that changed everything. Serial number 43-30-0426 was found in an Austrian aviation museum collection. How it had arrived there remained unclear initially. Careful investigation confirmed the aircraft was definitely Carpenter's famous machine. Serial numbers and other markings provided absolute proof of identity. More remarkably, the aircraft retained clear evidence of its extensive combat service, including multiple professionally patched bullet holes. The Collings Foundation acquired the historic aircraft in 2019 and brought it back to American soil. A careful restoration project began immediately, with historians and skilled technicians working together. They sought to return Rosie to her exact wartime configuration. The bullet hole patches were preserved as invaluable historical evidence of combat service. Restoration work revealed previously undocumented details about Carpenter's field modifications. The mounting points for his bazookas were still clearly visible on the wing struts. Analysis of the patches showed bullets had struck from multiple angles during different missions. This confirmed eyewitness accounts of attacks through heavy concentrated ground fire. Some patches overlapped, indicating the aircraft had been repaired multiple times between combat sorties. While Carpenter's bazooka, armed L-4, was never officially adopted as a standard weapon system, his concept influenced military thinking about organic Army aviation. The idea that ground forces needed their own air support independent of Air Force priorities gained credibility. Examples like Carpenter's direct battlefield intervention proved the value of immediate responsive air support. The Korean War saw limited experiments with armed light aircraft, though none achieved his level of success. The concept remained alive in military planning circles. Real vindication of his ideas came with attack helicopter development in the 1960s. The AH-1 Cobra and later Apache helicopters embodied exactly the same basic principle. Slow, low-altitude platforms could deliver precise direct fire support to ground forces. Modern military doctrine fully recognizes the value of what Carpenter demonstrated through his combat service. Air support doesn't always require fast jets and heavy bombs dropped from high altitude. Sometimes precise firepower delivered at close range proves more valuable than high-speed attack runs. The improvised nature of his weapon system also influenced military thinking about field modifications and soldier-driven innovation. The U.S. military became more receptive to bottom-up improvements and creative solutions from combat personnel. Recognition grew that troops in the field often developed practical solutions that rear area engineers hadn't anticipated. Combat experience provided insights that laboratory testing couldn't replicate. Innovation came from necessity and immediate practical requirements. In 2023, Carpenter's daughter, Carol Apaki, co-authored Bazooka, Charlie the Unbelievable Story of Major Charles Carpenter, and Rosie the Rocketer, with aviation writer James Busha. The book was based on hundreds of preserved letters and photographs. Research revealed the complex man behind the legendary reputation. Letters showed someone who was brave, but not reckless in his approach to combat. He was aggressive when necessary, but thoughtful about consequences and risks involved. His writing revealed someone who understood the moral complexities of warfare while maintaining absolute determination to perform his duty. He expressed pride in his achievements, but also genuine sadness about the necessity of killing enemy soldiers. One particularly moving letter, written after destroying a Tiger tank, reflected deeply on the humanity of his enemies. They were someone's sons, he wrote. Perhaps fathers themselves. But they were trying to kill his friends, and he couldn't allow that to happen. This emotional intelligence, combined with tactical brilliance, made him exceptional among warriors of any generation. Carol Apaki described her father as fundamentally a peaceful man who compartmentalized his wartime experiences completely. He had moved on emotionally, she explained in interviews about the book. I think he came back from the war somewhat shattered, and it was a hard time for my mother, too. She had spent 4 years trying to start her life over while waiting for him to return. A bronze sculpture was unveiled at Malena High School in 2023, commemorating Carpenter's extraordinary service. The statue shows him standing beside a representation of his famous L-4 aircraft. The dedication ceremony drew veterans, historians, and aviation enthusiasts from across the entire country. Former students from his teaching years, now elderly themselves, shared precious memories of a dedicated educator. None had any idea about his wartime heroics during their school days. The man who had changed aerial warfare never mentioned his achievements in the classroom. The American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts, where the restored Rosie the Rocketer is permanently displayed, created an extensive exhibit about Carpenter's remarkable service. Visitors can see the actual aircraft complete with its preserved battle damage and learn about the innovative pilot. Each patched bullet hole tells part of the story about impossible odds and extraordinary courage. The fabric that should have been shredded by enemy fire instead survived to educate future generations. History lives on through carefully preserved artifacts. The Experimental Aircraft Association features Carpenter's story prominently in educational programs nationwide. Young pilots learn not just about his tactical achievements, but about the kind of creative thinking that transforms limitations into decisive advantages. Military historians continue studying Carpenter's innovative tactics and their measurable impact on the Lorraine campaign. While his 6 confirmed tank kills might seem modest compared to thousands destroyed throughout World War II, the psychological and tactical impact far exceeded raw numbers. Carpenter's remarkable success raises important questions about innovation, courage, and the fundamental nature of warfare itself. How did a high school history teacher with no special combat training become one of the war's most unusual and effective fighting men? The answer lies in a rare combination of factors that seldom align so perfectly. First, his position as General Wood's personal pilot gave him unusual freedom to pursue independent initiatives and target selection. Most L-4 pilots were restricted to specific reconnaissance patterns and rigid schedules determined by higher command. Carpenter could hunt targets of opportunity, choosing when and where to strike, based on immediate battlefield conditions and his own tactical judgment. Second, his teaching background may have contributed significantly to his tactical thinking and battlefield analysis. History teachers understand patterns, cause and effect relationships, and the critical importance of timing in human events. Carpenter applied these analytical skills directly to combat situations, recognizing vulnerabilities that others might have missed entirely. Academic training proved surprisingly relevant to battlefield problem-solving and tactical innovation under extreme pressure. Third, the specific conditions of the Lorraine campaign created unique opportunities for his unconventional tactics. The relatively open terrain concentration of German armor and fluid nature of the battle meant targets were available for someone brave enough to engage them directly. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Carpenter possessed an extremely rare combination of physical courage and fatalistic acceptance that allowed him to repeatedly risk everything. His comment about attacking 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day revealed someone who had accepted the likelihood of death. The statistics of Carpenter's combat service, when examined closely, revealed the truly extraordinary nature of his achievement against impossible odds. 6 tanks officially confirmed destroyed, including 2 Tiger heavy tanks within that impressive total. Multiple additional armored vehicles and trucks destroyed through rocket attacks. 16 rockets fired in just 3 separate sorties on September 20th, 1944 alone. Approximately 100 combat missions flown during his tour of duty. 0 L-4 Grasshopper aircraft lost despite multiple direct bullet strikes and constant enemy fire. 1 pilot survived what should have been mathematically impossible odds through skill determination and remarkable luck. Each number represents dozens of split-second decisions during combat, any one of which could have proven immediately fatal. The fact that Carpenter survived his entire combat tour defied every probability calculation and statistical analysis. Contemporary pilots who attempted to emulate similar tactics rarely survived more than a few missions before being shot down. The economic equation proved equally remarkable when analyzed in detail. Total cost of Carpenter's L-4 and all modifications was less than $5,000. The Tiger tanks he destroyed cost over 250,000 Reichsmarks each to produce in German factories. This didn't include additional costs of training specialized crews and transporting completed vehicles to battlefield positions. In purely financial terms, Carpenter achieved one of the highest return on investment ratios recorded during the entire war. Despite extensive documentation, some aspects of his story remain mysterious and unexplained even today. How did he maintain the psychological stability necessary to continue such extraordinarily dangerous missions day after day? What internal drive pushed him beyond the already dangerous job of observation flying into direct combat engagement? His personal letters provide some valuable clues, but no complete answers to these fundamental questions. He wrote extensively about duty, about protecting fellow American soldiers, about wanting the war to end so he could return home to his family. But these motivations, while certainly admirable, don't fully explain the extraordinary risks he willingly took on a daily basis. Perhaps the answer lies in his specific generational context and formative experiences during the Great Depression. The men who fought World War II had survived the worst economic collapse in American history. They understood hardship, sacrifice, and the necessity of doing whatever circumstances required for survival. They had witnessed the rise of fascism and understood it represented an existential threat. For someone like Carpenter, who taught history and understood the historical stakes involved, half measures were simply unacceptable options. Perhaps the explanation was much simpler than complex psychological analysis might suggest. In war, ordinary people sometimes accomplish extraordinary things because circumstances demand nothing less than maximum effort. Carpenter saw a clear problem: German tanks killing American soldiers, and found a practical solution, however improbable it might seem. That his solution required flying a fabric-covered aircraft into point-blank range of enemy guns was simply an acceptable risk given the alternatives. The innovation influenced more than military tactics and battlefield procedures. His story became an integral part of American mythology about individual ingenuity triumphing over seemingly impossible odds. The idea that a clever individual with basic tools could overcome sophisticated enemy technology through determination and creative thinking resonated powerfully. This narrative proved particularly compelling in post-war America as the nation sought to understand its victory over enemies that had initially seemed so formidable and technologically advanced. Carpenter's David versus Goliath story provided the perfect metaphor for American values. American practicality and individual initiative had triumphed over German engineering excellence and rigid military tradition. The lesson seemed clear that democratic societies produced citizens capable of innovation under pressure, while authoritarian systems stifled creative thinking. The story also influenced how the military establishment thought about innovation and unconventional solutions to battlefield problems. Rather than automatically dismissing unusual ideas from junior officers or enlisted personnel commanders, became more open to field expedients and soldier-driven improvements. The lesson of Bazooka, Charlie, was unmistakable. Sometimes, the most effective solutions emerge from those closest to the immediate problem rather than from distant planning staffs and theoretical analysis. For the broader aviation community, Carpenter's exploits demonstrated the remarkable versatility of light aircraft in roles their original designers never imagined possible. The humble Piper Cub, designed as a basic trainer and recreational aircraft, had proven capable of missions no one anticipated. This adaptability would significantly influence post-war aircraft development philosophy, with designers increasingly considering multiple potential applications for their creations rather than single-purpose optimization. The story of Charles Bazooka. Charlie Carpenter defies every conventional military narrative and expectation. A high school history teacher flying an unarmed observation aircraft should never have been able to destroy German heavy tanks in direct combat. A fabric-covered aircraft powered by a 65-horsepower engine should never have survived repeated combat missions against concentrated ground fire from alerted enemy positions. 6 infantry bazookas strapped to wing struts should never have constituted an effective weapon system. Yet all of these seemingly impossible things happened repeatedly between September 1944 and February 1945. Carpenter transformed the L-4 Grasshopper from a passive observation platform into an active combat system that changed battlefield dynamics. His official tally of 6 tanks destroyed with 2 Tiger heavy tanks included in that total stands as one of the most improbable achievements in the entire history of military aviation worldwide. German forces throughout the Lorraine campaign learned to fear the distinctive sound of small aircraft engines approaching their positions. What had previously been harmless reconnaissance aircraft became potential harbingers of death from above at any moment. Tank crews who had felt relatively secure from American fighter bombers, which rarely operated in poor weather or at extremely low altitude, now faced a threat they couldn't effectively counter using conventional tactics or weapon systems. The transformation in German defensive procedures from ignoring L-4 aircraft to engaging them with every available weapon demonstrates the profound strategic impact of one innovative pilot's determination to make a difference. Carpenter forced the Wehrmacht to adapt anti-aircraft defenses, disperse armored formations, and constantly monitor skies for slow-moving aircraft that might carry deadly cargo. These tactical adjustments disrupted German operations and contributed measurably to American success. More than pure military achievement, Carpenter's story represents the ultimate triumph of individual ingenuity over rigid conventional thinking and established military doctrine. Faced with the persistent problem of German armor superiority, he created an unprecedented solution using only available materials and unlimited determination. Infantry bazookas were designed for foot soldiers. L-4 aircraft were designed for battlefield observation. Combined by someone willing to risk absolutely everything, they became something neither original designers nor military planners had ever imagined possible. The carefully restored Rosie the Rocketer, now displayed with all battle damage, meticulously preserved stands as a permanent testament to American innovation and individual courage under impossible circumstances. Each professionally patched bullet hole represents a specific moment when mathematical probability suggested immediate failure and death, yet Carpenter pressed his attack regardless of consequences. The aircraft that should have been destroyed multiple times instead survived to inspire future generations. Charles Carpenter died in 1966, having outlived his doctor's original prognosis by 19 remarkable years. He spent those additional years teaching young Americans about history and citizenship, perhaps hoping they would understand that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when circumstances absolutely demand maximum effort. His former students remembered him as demanding but fundamentally fair in his expectations, never knowing they were being taught by someone who had fundamentally changed the nature of aerial warfare through sheer willpower and innovative thinking. German tank crews who faced him across the battlefields of France would have been stunned to learn their most feared nemesis was simply a high school history teacher from Illinois. They would have been equally amazed to discover the weapon system that terrorized them consisted of nothing more than 6 infantry bazookas attached to a civilian aircraft. But perhaps they would have understood the larger universal truth about human nature and warfare. Innovation, courage, and absolute determination can overcome seemingly impossible odds when survival and victory hang in the balance. The humble L-4 Grasshopper that successfully hunted panthers and tigers across war-torn France proved conclusively that David could still defeat Goliath, especially when David possessed 6 modern slingshots and the unshakable courage to use them at point-blank range against overwhelming odds. In the final analysis that may represent the most important enduring lesson from Bazooka, Charlie's extraordinary war, that human ingenuity combined with raw physical courage can transform even the most humble and basic tools into decisive weapons of ultimate victory.